ask the question, could you include an object in another object as an attribute? And of course the answer was yes, and our code looked like this. We set up an account owner, created an instance of that account, and then that account owner, then we created an account, and then we added the account owner as an attribute to the account when we created it, and then we tested it. Okay, so here's a way that we could represent that in our class diagrams. We could have over here on the left-hand side account, and it has 3 different attribute names, which you've seen before, but I've added something new, which is the type of variable over on the right-hand side. Now in JavaScript, it isn't strictly necessary to declare in your code what type of variable it is. In other languages, you would need to think about this. But in this case, this simply helps us understand and know what type of variable we're planning to use as part of that. So of course, the account number is going to be an integer. The account owner is going to be of type account owner, which is over here, and here's the things that are part of that. Okay, let's move on to another topic, which is inheritance. You're probably familiar with the idea of inheritance as it relates to memes on the internet. People start off by watching a movie, they create a modification of maybe that image, and then they see that image and it inspires them to do all kinds of other fun things, like make ones that are gray or ones that are wearing COVID masks. Similarly, as it relates to inheritance, you're probably familiar with the idea that if your great-grandparents have some genetic material, that as they have children, that genetic material gets distributed to things that come after that, mainly their children and their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We can do similar things with classes and objects. In this case, for example, we could have this idea of a pet, and a universal set of attributes of pets would be that they each have a name and that they all can move. Now let's talk about pets at my house. There are particular versions of pets at my house that have all of those attributes, but then depending on the type of pet it is, it has other unique attributes and behaviors. So if I go down here, I have a fish, and my fish can technically swim at a particular rate of speed, and so I'm calling that an integer number. And the behavior that it can do, that not any pet can do, is swim. If I move over to here, I've got a cat, and one thing that my cat can do uniquely is it can meow at a certain volume level. Fortunately, it's not a very loud cat, and it can also use the litter box. And furthermore, I have a dog, and dogs can be licensed in many cities throughout the world, and so potentially I could have a license number associated with him and her, but not necessarily with a fish. We don't give license numbers to fish that are at our houses because they don't run away from your house ever. Something that my dog does that's semi-unique is because one of my dogs is a Chihuahua and he's a boy dog. If I ever let him out of my sight in the house, he reliably goes and finds a wall to pee on. Even if I've just let him outside to go pee, he will still pee inside the house because that's what he does. In terms of diagramming notation, this is how it looks like using UML class diagrams. Whenever something inherits from something else, we use an arrow with an empty head that points to its parent. So this is the parent and this is the child. And it's implied that everything that a parent has gets passed on to any software that is descended from this parent object or parent class. Now, this isn't an accurate diagram, but I put in the stuff in light gray just to emphasize the idea that if we have fish that are children of pets, in this example, at least in terms of software, they are going to inherit the property of, or an attribute of, a pet name, and it's going to inherit the method or the behavior of moving, and then it's going to add in some additional things. All right, let's go ahead and implement this idea in code. So bring out Visual Studio Code, And I'm going to create a new file, and I will call this pets.html. I'll do an exclamation point, hit return, and shrink that up. All right, let's go ahead and add a script tag where we can create our classes. And I will start with a pet. So at the highest level, there's a pet. And one of the attributes of pet is pet name. It's a string, so I'll write it like that. And a behavior or a method that it has is move. And in this case, since we're just teaching about the idea, I won't do anything terribly useful. I will simply do an alert statement that says I moved, so that we know that we triggered this particular method. Okay, so here's where the magic happens as it relates to inheritance. How do we create another class that has all of the stuff that the parent class has? So we write class fish, and the magic is in the keyword extends. Class fish extends pet, and if you recall, the fish has a property which is swim miles per hour, and it has a method which is swim. And similarly, I'll just say alert, I swam. Okay, let's test these out and see how they work. I will first off, let me create an object of type pet. I will say let object my pet equals new pet. And we need to give it a name. And since I'm trying to be very generic here, I will call it Dave the Mold Growth, because it's a more fundamental life form as we go back up that inheritance tree. And I need to put an equal sign there. And let's go ahead and then test that it can move. Oh my pet dot move. And I will hit save, and I will do go live. And it says I moved. And if I tested its name, it would work appropriately. Okay, now a pet does not have a method like swim, but let's try that. Let's say, does pet have a move method? Let's try that. I hit save. Oops, sorry. I meant to say swim. Okay, try that again. We hit save, it says I moved, and then it stops. And so if I go over to inspect and I go to console, it says swim is not a function. So swim is not a function that works with this. All right, let me comment out all of this code right here, and I'll do command / or control / to comment it out. So let's go ahead and create an object of type fish. Give ourselves a little bit more space here, and I'll say let object my fish equal new fish. And then I'll say, oh my fish. I can set its name, and we will call this one Goldie. And let's test that it can swim. So I'll say, oh my fish dot swim. So remember, when I called that method on pet, it didn't work. But let's see if it works for this one. So I hit save. I come over here, it says I swam, and the JavaScript console is not displaying any errors. All right, can I use the move method that I inherited from pet? Let's go ahead and test that out. So I'll type in oh my fish dot move, and I'll make a little comment here, and I'll say test parent class method. I hit save, and it says I swam, and then it says I moved. All right, so let's just think about this for a second. In terms of the parent, it can't access things that are properties, attributes, methods of things that are inherited from it. So for example, it cannot, an instance of pet cannot use swim. But something that is an instance of type fish can use all of the properties and the methods of the thing that it is descended from. When you think about more complicated things in programming, like this window that I'm looking at, oftentimes the visual things that we see they follow this idea of inheritance, where there's some high-level general objects, and then there's a viewable object, and maybe then there's a viewable rectangle, and then eventually it becomes a window through a pattern of descendancy. And at each step along the line in inheritance, it picks up more attributes and more functionality until it becomes something viewable, like this window or this program with a window in it. Okay, let's have you try and create objects of the other types that were suggested. So on here I have a cat with meow decibels and litter box, and I have a dog with a license number and pee on wall. So see if you can use the code that we just wrote to create two other animals that inherit from pet. And I'll just wait a second while you work through that. Okay, assuming that you have, let's go ahead and do the cat. I'll say create a class for cat that inherits from pet. So I'll say class cat extends pet. Its unique attribute is meow decibels, and its unique method or behavior is use litter box. And when it uses the litter box, I'll just say alert, I am a cat that just used the litter box. All right, and then finally, let's go ahead and test that. I'll say create an object of type cat. Let object my cat equal new cat. And then we'll say my cat dot, well, it doesn't have swim. Let's do meow decibels. And I don't know what a real appropriate number there is, so I'll just make up a number. Ooh, looks like, no wonder it was doing something weird. I wrote the wrong variable name. My cat dot use litter box. All right, let me go down and get rid of the alert statements that are going to occur down there, so I can just focus on the one that I care about right now. Okay, so cat is descended from pet, and let's do a few things with it. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And it says, I am a cat and I just used the litter box. Okay, I'm going to trust that you can do the example that involves the dog, and so that's enough of talking about inheritance.